Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Rahul Verma. I work here at the Center for Policy Research. Welcome to the 15th edition of How India Votes. For last 5 months, we have been trying to understand from various angles how Indians vote. And today we are joined by two esteemed panelists, Roshan Kishore, who is political economy editor at the Hindustan Times, and Harish Damodaran, who is Rural Affairs and Agriculture Editor at the Indian Express. Harish has been with CPR also for some time. And the conversation today is going to focus on does economy matter in India's voting calculus? And just to sort of like frame the conversation, recently, Mood of the Nation survey came out on India Today. While there was an increase in support for the BJP, the survey also clearly outlined that a large majority of Indian voters are concerned about their economic situation. And what seems to be happening, at least for last few years, is that there seems to be a disjunction between economy and polity. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask both Roshan and Harish to dwell upon is that does economy not at all matter in India's voting calculus, or is it just a recent phenomena? The second thing, and especially with ongoing farmers' protest, is that many economies, and especially for a developing economy like India, a transition from agriculture to, say, manufacturing or services does require a painful transition. And especially in a polity like India, where a large majority of voters are actually in the rural area, are dependent on agriculture, it seems that governments, not just the central government, but even state governments, have found an easy way to sort of like deal with this painful transition through providing various kinds of subsidies, cash transfers, and perhaps now a conversation on MSPs taking place. So how do is that balance like this balancing of contradiction between if you want a high growth path economy, you need to transition or at least move out of agriculture. And then you also need to take care of a large mass of voters who are dependent on agricultural sector. So how has been that balancing going on for India? So let me start with Roshan, and my sort of like quick question to you would be, Roshan, if you have to describe the current macroeconomic situation in India, especially in comparison to last few elections, how similar or different the current economic condition is?
One doesn't need to speak in this, right?
No, you just speak and should be press this.
Thank you, Rahul, for having me at CPR. It's always a pleasure to come here. Because we are having this conversation in the context of the forthcoming elections, the first thing, and I completely sort of disagree with any assessment which says that the economy doesn't matter as far as politics is concerned in India. I think we need to take into account two things. One, that an overwhelming majority of Indians are poor, no matter what like poverty statistics or new definitions say, I think is an absolute fact. And anybody who denies this will have no future in politics as far as India is concerned. I do not think that is a problem with this government. This is a government which has sort of made a political issue and has reaped dividends from something as basic as giving 5 kilo rice and wheat to 80 crore people, which is almost 2/3 of the country's population. So they completely sort of recognize the fact that large scale, you can call it destitution, precarity, whatever you choose to call it, is a fact in this country. And they do things, which they think are the best things to be done to tackle that. No, when it comes to election, I think the more important question is, because even poor people, the poorest of the poor people, do not expect governments to work miracles. Nobody, believes, although 2014, like the BJP and Modi won an election on Achhe Din, I don't think anybody took it seriously that, somebody like people are going to get 15 lakh rupees in their accounts and that sort of stuff. That is not something serious people believe in. And I sincerely believe that even the poorest of the poor voter is a serious person in this country. So then what matters is not what the descriptive macroeconomic stats of the economy are, but what has happened to the economy compared to, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I think that is the most important question which matters in election. If you compare this and, it is very telling that this government keeps, in every word it utters on the economy, its reference stat is where the economy stood in 2014. So that is where they always go back to. 10 years later, they have actually issued a white paper comparing the economy today to what it was, say, in 2014. And, you can say that I'm actually comparing 10 years of the UPA government, but the basic point is they always bring it down to 2014. That, now they have actually started writing in policy documents that the kind of growth which was, made or achieved in that period was actually unsustainable, was fueled by, say, unsustainable credit boom or whatever it is. But the crux of it is that UPA actually delivered higher growth than we did. But a lot of it was because of policies which came back to bite the economy and the country later. So that is the crux of the macroeconomic narrative of this government, that if you do not want to go back to 2014, vote for us. What was the macroeconomic situation in 2014 as far as the political economy is concerned? Fiscal balance was in a huge crisis. External balance was in a huge crisis. Fiscal balance was largely a function of the stimulus which the government rolled out after the 2008 crisis, but it could not take it back in time. Whether it should have done it or not is a value judgment question. We can skip that for the moment. External balance was largely a function of the taper tantrum happened in 2013 when the US Fed said it will start increasing rates. There was a flight of foreign exchange reserves from the country. Your exports sort of collapsed because of the global financial crisis, but imports did not come down concomitantly. That was the story of the external balances. These two put together and a very high inflation. Now, one can always say that, it was actually a period when crude oil had been doing $120, $130 per barrel in the last 3 years of the UPA2 government. And this is a situation which, if it faces any government in this country, is bound to lead to high inflation. But even then, inflation percolated to food items and other such stuff also. So you had high fiscal deficit, high inflation, and a very bad external account situation. These three, inflation created a lot of public anger, coupled with allegations of corruptions. Some of them have been overturned by the Supreme Court, but no matter which way you look at it, the narrative clearly held. It even holds today. The optics of UPA2 being mired in corruption were very difficult to deny. And inflation created large-scale rural anger among the poor, I would say even the middle classes. They would actually, I still remember senior UPA ministers coming on TV and defending pulse inflation and whatnot. They were actually adding fuel to the public anger. Crisis in India's fiscal account and external account and high inflation deeply worried capital, both domestic and foreign. And add to that policy paralysis, sort of files not being cleared, one ministry acting against another ministry's judgment, Manmohan Singh being seen as a very weak prime minister, corruption scandals and all that. So basically, the UPA ended up alienating both capital as well as the poor. And this is what led to the disaster which the Congress faced in 2014. Of course, there are exogenous factors like a crude oil shock or the global financial crisis, or a global food price hike after the 2008 crisis. All those factors are there. And, a government is lucky or unlucky to have favorable or unfavorable exogenous factors. It has to live with that. Politics, you can't sort of, make a delta for these factors. The Modi government has been lucky. Even after the COVID crisis, it has managed to, even after the Ukraine war, inflation in our country has not been as bad as, what it is in the advanced countries even today. So all that's there. Does it mean that, this government or the prime minister has just been lucky? This clearly merit in the argument. But I think if you want to make an informed political economy argument, one thing which differentiates, I would say, this government from the previous government is that, this government has a unity of purpose. So you have in Narendra Modi, the person, and the person in capital letters, who is in charge of securing both the mandate of the poor as well as the confidence of capital. In the UPA government, there was never a unity of purpose on this. So you had on the one hand, Manmohan Singh, P. Chidambaram, Montek Singhs of the world, who were intellectually wedded to the cause of reforms in India, to the cause of, say, what foreign capital or international institutions such as the World Bank or the IMF think was right for India. And you had, on the other hand, Sonia Gandhi and the National Advisory Council, who were actually pushing the agenda to include more welfare, more entitlements, whatever you might call it. And the way I see it in retrospect now is that there was a fundamental disjoint between these two arms of that political regime. Manmohan Singh and his pro-reform comrades had absolutely no stakes in preserving the political mandate of the UPA. This was a responsibility which solely rested with Sonia Gandhi and the larger Congress party. Whereas in this government, Modi is actually, he is clearly by far the most popular leader. And, I mean, the most counterintuitive thing is his popularity spans the class divide. So, from the richest of the rich in not just the country, but the world, to the poorest of the poor, he's seen as the man of the masses. He's seen as the man who can do nothing wrong. I think it is this fact which you have to give credit to the government if you're coming from a hard-headed political economic perspective. Even this budget of the government, before a general election, I mean, nobody presents this kind of budget. At least nobody's ever presented this kind of a budget in this country. So he clearly believes that the poor actually believe in what he says he's doing for them. They will actually vote for him. And he's managed to do it without alienating capital. So right now, the Modi government is in a very sweet spot. I think there's no other way to describe it. Whether this is a balance which will last going forward, is for time to tell. I can stick my neck out and say that it is very unlikely that this will not last at least till the next general elections, till 2024, because all of us will be very surprised, even shocked, if the BJP were to lose the election. That doesn't look like a possibility at all. But there is light beyond 2024. And these structural challenges which Rahul started with, agriculture to industrial services transformation and that sort of stuff is not going anywhere. So the more powerful the BJP becomes, the more difficult it will be for the BJP to sort of, and even for the BJP in 2029, it will be difficult to fight an election on, say, what happened in 2014. So the more time you spend in power, the more difficult it will become. That's there. But one thing which I think, a lot of people do not talk about also is that, a government's political popularity is as good or bad as, the strength of the opposition it faces. And there, the last 10 years, I would say, I don't think we've ever had a more clueless, fragmented, weak opposition in this country as far as economic issues are concerned. I'll give you examples. Imagine the UPA government doing demonetization, and how would the BJP in opposition have reacted? Imagine a UPA government selling petrol, diesel way above what the international crude oil prices are. They've been doing so for a year. Deregulated petrol, diesel prices have become, they're practically dead in this country. The opposition has not been able to do anything. Here is a government which has been, a lot of people will say it is a good thing, in order to cut losses of the railways. They have been gradually but steadily phasing out low-cost rail travel. Sleeper coaches are being cut. A lot of passenger trains have been discarded. They actually discontinued them during COVID. A lot of them have not been recontinued. The opposition has been able to do absolutely nothing. Whereas, so the poor people actually see the opposition doing nothing on these issues, which are their day-to-day bread and butter issues, and then going and making outlandish promises such as we'll give, say, cash transfers to everybody, or we'll give MSP for every. I mean, no farmer in this country believes that, once Rahul Gandhi becomes the prime minister of this country, from dhania to dal to everything, you're going to get MSP for. So you're actually making claims which have very little credibility, investing all your political capital in them, and you are doing nothing to fight the daily battles which common people would actually relate to if they were fought. So this is what I think of the situation. So it is not that, the BJP has waved some magic wand or spell on the people. I think it is a mix of favorable exogenous factors. The political head of the regime being completely hands-on in securing not just the mandate of capital, but also the mandate of the poor, and the opposition being absolutely clueless and inefficient.
Thank you, Roshan, for giving us an insight into both, favorable exogenous factors, political leadership, and perhaps opposition is failing to realize how to mobilize on some of the economic questions. Harish, if I can come to you, and since you've been covering, agriculture and rural areas for a very, very long time, two questions. One, sort of like a political and voting question. BJP used to have a disadvantage in rural areas, which seems to be now at least the north and central and west part of India. That seems to be going away. BJP has penetrated in rural India. Is it just based on leadership, charisma, and political, religious, cultural issues, or there is something to do with economy or management of economy, at least in narrative sense, either through giving free rations or through certain other measures such as PM Kisan and other things that they have managed to reach there? The second question is much more like, what kind of I think 2018 Madhya Pradesh was perhaps one indication of some sort of like rural distress which spilling over into elections and voting behavior. Even then, the backlash against BJP wasn't large, right? Like the vote share gap was very, very small. So, like while surveys continue to show that people are distressed economically, what is your sense from the ground, and why and under what conditions it translates into politics?
See, I would say definitely in the first term of the Modi government.
Switch this on.
Yeah.
Dono
Acha, both. Okay. I would say that in the first term of the Modi government, there was certainly a huge farmers' crisis, okay, agrarian crisis, especially after demonetization, prices collapsed, and all these things. And you can see, I mean, it happened. You see the results which happened. I mean, you had the Gujarat elections in 2018, right? And then you had the Madhya Pradesh and these elections, where definitely I think farmer distress played a role. Okay, especially in a state like Gujarat, where BJP has never, kind of lost. I mean, and especially in the entire Saurashtra region, they were wiped out. And even in northern Gujarat, they were wiped out. So I would say that there was definitely an agrarian crisis in Modi 1. Okay. But on the other hand, I would say that the Modi government is probably the first government to realize that there are more number of consumers than producers in the country. Okay. And during Modi 1 period, if you see, inflation was very benign.
Yes.
Okay. Your overall CPI, I think the average was something like 4.3%. And retail food inflation was just 3.3%. Okay. So the number of consumers who benefited far outweighed the number of producers who lost out, because of low prices and those kind of things. And India overall experienced a positive terms of trade shock because your international crude prices fell, international commodity prices fell, etc. Okay, so and probably the BJP was the first party to call the bluff of the middle peasant, the so-called whatever, the Jats, the Yadavs, etc. Right, and they were able to reach out to whatever the non-dominant rural communities. So whether it was your Kashyaps, your Sainis, small holders, basically whatever the so-called service castes. Right, and they were able to show that and they were able to, I think, break the dominance of the land-owning peasant caste, and probably they were able to create that kind of a nexus. So I would agree with what Roshan said, that they were able to play up to both capital and the poor. So it's basically the middle guys who got squeezed. Okay, so as I said, in Modi 1, I would say there are two things which happened. Producers were hit very badly, okay, which included small industry, okay, small manufacturers, small producers, and farmers, okay. But they were these whatever the poor, the consumers who benefited because of this thing, and that continued, I think, even in Modi 2. With with all your lockdown, etc., right, and where they expanded the PDS, right. Suddenly, like I think Yamini, all of us who went there, we saw that everybody got the ration, the grain, and which was probably the first time in history that you really had surplus grain which was flowing around, and everybody was saying that I had extra grain, I didn't need this, and then they were giving it off to some, and a lot of it actually flowed out, and we also exported record quantity of that grain, right? I mean, so for the first time, you had a case where actually people, whatever, even in a crisis, whatever, in a total lockdown kind of a situation, people got their food, and plus you had an expanded MG Narega, etc. Okay, so I would say that in the second term, it it as a continuation of the first, basically where the consumer, the number of the poor. So it's a again very counterintuitive alliance between the Adanis and the absolute poor. So and by this time you also had you had the GST and you had all these things. The tax collections kind of improved, right? So and you have a formalization in the economy. So you are able to extract more revenues, right? I mean, more revenues from the and that in turn, some of it they were able to, I mean, from a political economy, transfer it in the form of high food subsidy and those kind of things. Okay, so I would say this is the whatever you can politically positive what has worked for the government. Okay, but now what has happened is, see, there is a crisis in production. Okay, and according to me, that is the real crisis in India today. So which is why you see very few jobs happening. Okay, and I would say in Modi too, agriculture has not been as much in crisis as non-agriculture.
Okay.
So, and this is borne out even in your wages data. Agricultural wages have actually grown at a higher rate than non-agricultural wages in rural areas. So today the real crisis is exactly what you mentioned in the beginning. There is no structural transformation happening, right? In fact, the number of people who are employed in agriculture today are higher than what they were in 2018-19, right? And the number of people who are now are engaged in manufacturing is less than even construction and low wage kind of a thing. So the poor is also a producer. Okay, the poorest producer is now facing a crisis. Okay, the poorest consumer, ठीक है, वो मिल गया, दाना मिल गया. But again, the second thing is your inflation has been higher in UPA in Modi too. Okay, I think average inflation, CPI inflation has been about 5.5%, and food inflation has been 6.6%. So it's not as though poorest consumers are also having a good time. So I would say that definitely, I mean. The economic situation is much worse today than what it was during that period, because during that period, okay, your producer, there was a crisis of producers, whether it was small industry, whether it was agriculture, etc. But today, I believe there is a crisis. Definitely, I mean, I think the crisis of production has only intensified. I mean, in terms of open unemployment, which is happening today, and no jobs. I mean, more and more people going into agriculture. Right, and there is also some kind of a feminization of entrepreneurship happening. Not just labor. So more people are trying to seek work. And definitely you see a pressure on wages, etc. Downward pressure on wages. So there is both a production and also definitely I don't think consumption is. It's not. I think inflation is a problem. So I believe that. Things aren't good. I mean, from a thing. Whereas I totally agree with Roshan that the economic situation wasn't bad. I mean, in the sense, it is not that people didn't vote. People voted for Modi in 2019 only for whatever extra economic thing.
They felt economy compared.
Yeah, they felt whatever something good. Because I think basically whatever low inflation. And those kind of things. Whereas I don't think there would be that kind of a pro-incumbency now,
at least on the economy,
on the economy kind of a thing. Whereas it would be more because the opposition is in shambles, etc. So people, even if they are angry now, whom do they ventilate their frustration, anger, etc.
Thank you, Harish. To friends on Zoom, if you have questions, please put on Q&A box, and my colleague Prakriti would send it to me. I'll just have another round of questions with Roshan and Harish, and then I'll come to Q&A. So, Roshan, you'll have to correct me on questions that I asked, since I'm not an expert on this thing. To my understanding, even if inflation in the current Modi 2 has been higher, overall, if you compare, say, pre-1990s, when inflation used to be high and volatile, what seems to be have happened post 1990s, that inflation is generally on the lower side and much more stable except the 2008 to 2014 period when the inflation went up and also became volatile. And perhaps that became a reason in 2014. Economy mattered to some extent because people were facing serious sort of like inflationary issues. And in 2019, economy again would have mattered, as you were saying, because things had improved compared to 2014 in 2019. So so now what you both are saying is that there are problems on two fronts. One is actually the jobless. I don't know whether growth is happening or not, but basically we are in an era where unemployment seems to be very, very high. And at least prices also remain a concern for a large segment of the population. It could be a question about whether things have become expensive or large portion of population is not able to afford. To me, analytically, those things are different, but let's leave it to that. So, and especially since Roshan, you brought the question of, opposition. My question here to you is whether the government not being able to do or not doing anything on the question of unemployment and price rise, is it because that it's a hard sort of like platform to sell on the ground to blame, say, unemployment has increased because of the government policies or prices have increased only because of the government policies? So something cannot be politically sold. Whereas what you interestingly mentioned that this government realizes, and both Harish also pointed out, that there is a large consumer segment, and so target each one of them. And what this government seems to have done for me is that they have cleverly figured out that to extreme poor provide free ration, to the salary government middle class increase their NPS. I think it was earlier 10%, which was increased to 14% government contribution, which is a massive increase. And then like taxes have not been raised massively in that sense. And so it basically building then an economic coalition through very carefully charted policies. Would you agree, disagree? Why is not an like anger on economic issues translating into political thing? Is it only because of opposition, or is it careful management of different economic consequences?
Let me first talk on the inflation bit. See, as far as political economy is concerned, there's no one inflation number which matters for everybody. So right now, what is it? So I think we're doing around 5.1% in terms of CPI. I think food inflation January is 8% plus. Core inflation, which basically measures the non-fuel, non-food part of the CPI, is actually at a 50-month low. It's 3.9 or something. If you look at WPI, so almost 40% of the CPI basket is just food. Around 1/4 of the food basket, if I'm not wrong, is just cereals. So a CPI basket for people like you and me would be very different from what it is at the average level. Because we don't have a latest consumption expenditure survey. The last one on which the CPI basket is still based is 2011-12. It says that for the poor, food spending is actually 60-70% of their overall household spending. I mean, that is clearly not the case for, say, the middle classes, even the lower middle classes. So I would say that for, say, the top 30-35% of the population, inflation is actually much lower than what the headline number tells us. Because for them, the core part of the CPI basket matters. That's one. If you were to look at WPI, it was contracting for the last for 7 months. Then for the last 3 months, it's doing sub 1%, which is what explains the fact that your real GDP growth rate this year is going to be 7.3%, whereas the nominal number is going to be just 8.9%. So a lot of people have been wrongly sort of saying that, so either the inflation numbers are fudged, which is because inflation is 5% plus, or the GDP numbers are fudged. Your GDP deflator, which is the difference between the nominal and the real growth, essentially captures the overall composition of your GDP, which has industry, services, and that sort of stuff. The WPI index, which is sub 1%, actually captures, in a way, the producer price index. It doesn't have services. So top 30-35%, how does it matter in terms of political economics? So top 30-35% of the economy, the middle classes, who play a disproportionate role in opinion building, are not being hurt by inflation. They are not being able to, I mean, that was not the case when the UPA 2 was fighting elections. Because the WPI has been contracting for most of the fiscal year, it is actually very low. Corporate profits have been zooming, because, I mean, corporates have been buying inputs at very low prices, practically zero inflation, but they've been able to sell it at slightly higher inflation. So you'll see actually a boom in corporate profits in this fiscal year. So that's there. So to come back to the poor, they anyway, live a wretched life. I think they are grateful for the fact, and this is where, I mean, politics comes in. So Modi knows that he can't give them free pulses, or he can't give them free vegetables or free milk. But he's at least like made the notional act of waiving off that 2 rupees or 3 rupees which they had to pay on their rice and wheat for PDS, and he's made a big deal of it. I mean, this is propaganda 101. And you do something which has like small tangible gain, but you sell it so much that people actually start getting obliged by you. So this is where politics comes in. So this is, what, as far as the inflation situation and the political aspect of it is concerned. And, capital and corporates are very happy that the government has been, the RBI has been extremely hawkish on inflation. This approach of, killing the farmer to save the consumer has continued. Every week you see, this is the government which brought farm laws and said that, we are going to free all markets. Every week you have some crop or the other where exports are being banned, or this is being done, or that is being done. So this government monitors, food prices on a daily basis, and at the slightest, hint that they are going out of control, it just bans. So onion exports are banned today, pulse exports are banned tomorrow, something will happen, this will happen, that will happen. That's there. The only thing which I want to add to what Harish said was, so, even though the government invested in, and he's absolutely right, that, I actually went to cover the Maharashtra elections, assembly elections in 2019. And I was talking to the BJP district president in Nashik, which is where, Lasargaon and Pimpalgaon, these big onion mandis are. And I asked him, whatever, the BJP is doing at the national level in terms of banning onion exports, and it must be working for it. I said, but your life must be very difficult because, onion farmers are your voters. They don't vote for you, you lose the election. So he told me it can be an issue for one district, but, this is like a question of national interest. So I'm not very upset about it. Having done all that, the BJP also had to unleash, say, PM Kisan in a retrospective effect in the 2019 interim budget. So it knew that the anger was real, and it actually threw fire extinguisher at that angle. What is surprising is this budget has absolutely nothing. Almost everybody was expecting that you will at least make some nominal increase in the PM Kisan entitlements, because 6,000 rupees in 2019 is basically worth 3,000 rupees today. Even that has not been done. So they are right now feeling extremely confident. I think it is there that, the opposition's cluelessness and they're not being able to invest in, look at the timeline of the opposition. They first, say, rewind a year from now. So they, when did the Bihar government start conducting the caste census? Around a year from now.
Yeah.
Then the opposition decided that, this is the issue to take up and all. And like, no momentum was built absolutely there also. Let us for the moment forget whether we agree or disagree with the demand. And in the meantime, there no economic momentum was built. So right now, the government is in a very sweet spot. I mean, nobody is even demanding that they should have done more. If the opposition had, say, waged a campaign, something as basic as index PM Kisan, payments to, say, basic CPI adjustment, I mean, the government would have had a very difficult time saying no to that demand. But these guys live in some alternate universe because, I'm somebody who's been a former finance minister will come and make a customary press conference. That doesn't hurt the government. What hurt the government is if Modi makes rations free, and which is basically like a saving of maybe 100 rupees for a household in a month, it goes to town with it. The opposition doesn't do that. This is why, despite the economic situation, not being like exactly very good at the moment, growth is high, but inflation is also slightly higher. Corporate middle classes are not being hurt by inflation because of, the class composition of the inflation basket. We, the poor, have not been spoken to.
Thank you, Roshan. Harish, if I can bring you in, and just drawing on what Roshan ended up with, you've been at a newspaper for a very, very long time, and you continue to go on the ground. Last week you were in Western UP. The opposition's complaint would be that it's not that we don't try to make these demands, but any demand to get amplified or lead to some kind of mobilization also needs support of different actors. So one question would be that, perhaps media, and I'm not media ecosystem in general is not very supportive of opposition's any demand, rather than they stand on the side of the government, right? So that's one issue. Two, if like you go on the ground and if people do feel the pinch of these economic concerns, they mentioned that in the survey, why don't they then come out in favor of opposition leaders or opposition parties? I'm not saying to vote, but at least to stand with them and say, like, you lead our protest and we'll be with you. So what is missing? Or is it basically of like top opposition leaders are living in some la la land and they are not able to figure out the language of how to use economic questions to mobilize?
Yeah, see, again, just first to add to what Roshan was saying, today's inflation is basically in dal, roti, and chini. Okay, which matters to the poor. Okay, the inflation is not much in other kind of things. So there is a real, I mean, and when you combine that with the fact of lack of jobs, etc., there is a real distress today, you know. So there is a distress of both producer and consumer. Okay, so so now it is obviously it's very clear that last time you had a strong government and probably a strong economy. You know, it had both. It had both positives going on, going for it. You know, the positives on the economy plus the government's own this thing. But this time, definitely there are no positives on the economy. Okay, but the government is strong and the opposition is much weaker than even at that time, right? At that time, you had a Congress which had won those very important assembly elections and
From 2017
yes, absolutely. Till yeah, then they goofed up whatever, whether goofed up or and precisely because of that, they actually came out with the PM Kisan on a retrospective kind of effect. They also announced some income tax SOPs during in the interim budget. But now I don't know whether there is some kind of hubris even among the government. You know,
Okay.
Like for example, in the case of the MSP, the right to MSP, the kind of overreaction we are having, this indicates very high level of, I mean, according to me, it is hubris. They think that it doesn't matter, because we have seen, in the past how governments could deal with all these mobilizations. If you remember 1988, December when Mahinder Singh Tikayat came and they stayed here in that boat club lawns for I don't know some 10 days. It was a siege, but government sort of they kind of. They kind of engaged with them, sort of humored them. They allowed it. Whereas this time, I mean, it is unprecedented. I mean, the use of rubber bullets, the drones. I mean, the same Modi who was talking of, that drones for spraying pesticides, spraying whatever, tear gas shells. So. There is somewhere it is not fitting in, it is not adding up, it means it could be that this government itself is in la la land.
Okay.
It is possible.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know, maybe they could be a 1977 kind of a moment. I think people there didn't care who the opposition was,
true.
and they voted with their feet. I don't know whether that's going to happen, but I wouldn't.
What is your sense from Western UP? You were there last week.
Everywhere I could sense there is anger. There is a lot of anger. Okay, like I don't think that just because say a Jayant Chaudhary moves this thing and automatically even the voters will follow suit. It's not going to be that simple. Okay, so today you have a situation where the opposition is in this thing, and I don't know, because I'll be sitting with an opposition leader today, and I don't know whether by tomorrow he would have moved to some other party.
Yeah.
So it is that kind of a situation. So I think the government is basically counting on the fact that the opposition is in shambles, and every day, so that will sort of, bring in some kind of a cynicism among the voters, and they'll say, "Chalo yaar, theek hai, ek baar aur kar hi lete hain, kya kare?" I think that seems to be maybe that is probably likely to be the outcome, because the opposition, absolutely, I mean, just doesn't inspire properly, unless there are some out of syllabus stuff, we don't know, and yeah.
Before I get audience in, Roshan, one last quick question. Since you had used the word confidence while presenting this budget, and it seems Harish is using the word hubris. Where does the take of the government lie at the moment? Is it confidence, and is it the confidence only on that opposition is in shambles, or they think that they have been able to manage the political economy situation well enough to actually go in elections with confidence? And this was also needed, a kind of a step to continue making that coalition with the capital and also perhaps high income groups.
Answering this question requires a slightly more detailed, look at what's happening political economy wise. So India right now, if you look at our GDP number, is the fastest growing major economy in the world. This has been the case for the last few years, and this will be the case for the next few years, as far as IMF projections are available. So the crisis of production and employment, which Harish is talking about, and I don't think it's untrue. It is actually a problem for, I would say, the bottom 60-70% of the economy. The top quadrant of the economy is actually doing very well. Perhaps it has never had it better. If you look at something as basic as income tax collections, which is what the white collar earning indicator in this country is, they're growing at a massive rate. They've actually overtaken corporate tax collections in our country, which is corporate profit. So white collar workers are actually earning more in salaries than, say, capitalists are earning in profits. This has never happened in this country. What is the kind of growth we are having? Have we suddenly started, say, exporting stuff to the rest of the world? It's happening in tidbits, but the magnitude of it vis-a-vis, the size of the Indian economy is actually very small. So that's not the case. I think the primary driver of economic growth under this government, and which is very different from what it was under the UPA government, has been the formalization of what used to be erstwhile informal. So a lot of growth is actually happening by bringing under the fold of the formal economy stuff which was informal. Somebody like, say, Reliance, Mukesh Ambani, whose Jamnagar petrochemical refinery is perhaps the best in the world, not just in India. Where is he foraying into today? He's setting up retail, he's setting up high value retail, that kind of stuff. This is not stuff which needs, this is not the proverbial rocket science. Anybody with money can do it. You don't need a Mukesh Ambani to do it. This is where Tata is going. This is where everybody else is going. So more and more people are realizing, and when I say people, I'm talking about like big capital, that a lot of money is to be made by selling to who are already rich. This money can keep generating enough revenue to give that palliative to the poor people, which the Modi government has been given. And as long as the government preserves macroeconomic stability, which is your fisc and external balance and inflation, this is an arrangement which can actually go on. So that is the crux of the story. So I think the confidence of the government comes from both, that it has actually delivered on one without compromising the other. There the cluelessness of the opposition has also helped. And I think what has also not helped the opposition, that it is still perhaps unable to decide whether it should put its vote of trust in the kind of growth we are having. That would actually require all of India's opposition to take a very sharp left economic turn. Then you do not celebrate startups. Then you do not celebrate FDI. And this is stuff which the Congress party at least has not done, especially since the 1990s. The Congress party still likes to take credit for reforms in this country. The basic question to ask is, reforms can give you, say, 7.5. I mean, even the BJP is not talking about a 10% growth rate right now. But they will never give you equality. Now, for the Congress to start selling that narrative, it will have to unlearn a lot of things. The regional parties, I don't think even give a damn, because, barring, say, the Dravidian parties such as the DMK or something, and these are very state-specific factors. Tamil Nadu has actually, social justice has played a role, its coastal proximity has played a role, etc. But Tamil Nadu is not representative of the BJP's probably majority parrot is basically the Hindi belt. The BJP loses UP and Bihar, the BJP is finished. Yeah. It cannot even come close to the majority mark in the Lok Sabha. There, RJD, SP, the BSP is as good as dead as far as I see it as a political party. They are still trying to resurrect the Mandal Jain. If you want to do that, you cannot even start talking about, I mean, the kind of economic contradiction I am trying to highlight. Because you see, you can call Jayant Chaudhary an opportunist. You can call a lot of opposition leaders an opportunist today. But he is somebody whose political legacy comes from championing what Harish called, I'm the arrogant middle peasant of the country. I mean, the left in the old days used to call them the Kulak class of the country. For if he has to hold on to that legacy, he will never be able to reconcile it to, say, the PDA alliance, the Pichhada Dalit Alpasankhyak alliance, which Akhilesh Yadav is trying to sell. Because the Jats are actually the oppressors in those parts of the country. They are anything but socially oppressed. They've suffered a sort of downfall in their economic fortunes, but socially, I mean, they are still the oppressors. So you can't put your, it is an extremely unfashionable thing to say, I mean, a lot of people would cancel me for saying that, but today you have to decide it. So you either try and pursue the social justice angle, and there the opposition has absolutely nothing which the BJP does not have.
Yes.
If you ask for caste census, they'll give you Rohini Commission. It is only a matter of time. Or you invest in an economically left kind of a narrative, and then you basically burn your bridges with, big capital in this country, which also means you drastically, I mean, that model is already destroyed, but you'll have to completely reinvent your political funding model. As long as the opposition cannot decide on this basic contradiction, the BJP will pretty much have a walkover politically.
One quick question to you, Harish. Thank you, Roshan. Now, since Roshan is also talking about what the future of opposition politics can be, given the numbers, actually, Roshan said the 40% is growing and the 60% is facing trouble. It seems like if BJP continues to get, say, 70-80% of the 40% and just 20% of the 60%, they are around.
Who's 60%?
So basically, I think what Roshan is saying that like 35 to 40% of India's population is seeing some kind of improvement in their lives, and it's the bottom 60% which is basically stagnant or some may be declining. Right, the way socially that model works, that BJP tries to score 70% or 60% of Hindu vote, and then sometimes like 5 to 10% of other vote, right? If you think in terms of these two economic class, can BJP still try to remain sort of like politically dominant by carving 70% of the top 40% and just 20% of the poor, 20-25% of the poor, and they are in 40% range? And if opposition remains as fragmented as it is in a dominant party system, if you are in the 35 to 40% range, you are going to be close to the 272 mark. Do you think this kind of politics, which Roshan is suggesting, if this kind of politics has to come on the economic left, then there has to be a political alliance among parties, or Congress alone can sort of like resurrect this kind of economic left axis of mobilization? And would there be takers, given that, there has to be a structural contradiction to be kept in mind, that you will see greater urbanization, even if with slow pace and lopsided urbanization. So all directions of the demography would be in the other direction, where economic left model can succeed.
Okay, first of all, since you're talking of the whatever top 40%, right? Whatever, 40%. See, let's understand which are the sectors of the economy that have done well and generated jobs. Okay, one is the IT services. Okay, if you just look at the top 5 companies, you just take TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, and Tech Mahindra. These 5 together, because I had estimated that before the lockdown they employed about, I think, 11.5 lakh people, and by I think September 2022 that went up to about 16 lakh. Okay, you had so many extra jobs in IT. Second sector which did very well was startups, this thing, because you had basically cheap, you had cheap, very low global interest rates. So a lot of money came into India and all these things. So startup sector was another sector which generated a lot of jobs. Okay, so when you look at the startup and the IT, I think these two together itself would have generated a lot of jobs in that particular 40% which which we are talking about. And this actually thrived, during the lockdown period when the other producers, etc., they were totally smashed during this period. Now, today there is a clear retrenchment on that score. Okay, we are seeing layoffs happening in IT companies. I think in the last quarter, everybody shed jobs except I think HCL. I think HCL still added jobs. All the others have shed this thing. That is number one. Number two, you see the funding winter for all the startups, right? I mean, they're all, everybody is kind of so the number of whatever unicorns, who are being added. Rather, actually, there is actually a negative. The number of unicorns actually are coming down. Okay, this is the second thing. So, and plus there was another source of income where a lot of money was made was because your markets went up, right? So many people who went into, and India, you had a lot of retail investors. Okay, so that was also another source of money. So I would say that, when we are talking of, the media being controlled, the narrative, and as you yourself said, the narrative is set by the middle class, and that middle class has to be, in the top 40%, but not the top 10. It should be the same. So you can see that even that one is, it is a little shaky now. And I think another proof of it is for the first time you're seeing that from IIT campuses there is no 100% placement. There was that WhatsApp message from that, I think IIM Lucknow, which went viral, right? I mean, they were asking. So it's not that things are very comfortable there. So I believe that the actualist heels of this government is going to be unemployment, and when you add all these, Agniveer and these kind of things. So maybe somebody like Rahul Gandhi, he's not, I mean, I think this reservations, I don't think, I mean, I agree. I don't think, I think that Mandal probably it's a past story. And as he said, for every Mandal, you can throw back a Rohini commission, right? I mean, there are too many. It's not as though OBCs today are a homogeneous entity. There are many. There are many layers within the OBC kind of a thing. Whereas I think if someone like Rahul Gandhi were to take up, causes of things like, Agniveer, youth unemployment, farmer, but in a more systematic way, just see, sometimes you have to just keep it at just one campaign, so like for example, in 2014 you had just corruption, Lokpal, right? I mean, that kind of had this thing. Whereas if you come out with probably too many messages and some of which are contradictory to each other, probably it will not happen. And I don't think, I mean, apart from Congress, anybody else can take these issues.
Let's disagree with both of you. Okay, first with Harish, factors is pointed out such as low placements and all. I think they all exist. But I think the larger question is, there are always cyclical, factors in any economy, and India is too large an economy to not have them. I think we have to accept 2-3 facts. One, like I said, for me, the marker of the white collar workforce doing well are the income tax collections. A lot of, look at your newspapers, flats worth 10 crore, 20 crore, being like advertised and being sold within minutes. Somebody has, and these are transactions not happening in black money. They're transactions which are happening in white money. Somebody is clearly earning a lot of money in the economy. I think, the bigger threat to, this trend would be, rather than say a cyclical factor or say the US economy or the German economy being in recession, which is what essentially, determines the state of a software industry, are things such as, say, how will AI impact, our software sector? These are structural problems which go beyond any Narendra Modi or anybody else. So those we have to watch out for. But as of now, I think, we will have to accept that investor confidence, both domestic and international, is extremely bullish on India. They are extremely bullish about the fact that we are going to have political stability. And, India's assessment, by capital, both national and international, I mean, especially the latter, is also a relative thing. If China starts doing 8% tomorrow, they'll all move from India. But right now, India is too big and too fast an economy to ignore. That's there. No, as far as your thing is concerned, right? So when talking about economic contradictions, I think we have to think of it in a slightly more different way than the way we think of a caste chessboard. The typical 10, 25, 10, 35, alignment is what you do on a caste chessboard. I don't think the predicament of the opposition as far as the economy is concerned is that, I mean, what is really sort of hurting the opposition, and it is almost like sort of paralyzed by it, what Modi is doing as far as the economic narrative in this country is concerned, he is actually selling what can be told, as a caricature of the great American dream. What you had in the United States, say, after the Second World War with the New Deal and all that. I mean, this stuff of I am going to make India a developed country by 2047 and all that, Modi is not going to be around by then. I mean, nobody is going to be able to seek accountability from him for this. But his political genius lies in the fact that it has actually made a lot of people in this country, including poor voters, believe in this. Now, what is the economic challenge facing the opposition today? In India, you've always had inequality, you've always had poverty, you've also had class contradictions. So in the village, if you look at Mother India, I'm Sunil that would say the landlord or the Lala is my class exploiter. If you come to the 1970s, say, and Amitabh Bachchan would actually go to, say, a big warehouse where food is being hoarded, black marketing is being done, etc. Who is the class enemy in this country today? Like, if you put a poor man on the street and tell him to point at his class enemy, because, in the unicorns of the world and the startup evangelists of the world, he actually sees people who are not exploiting him, but just smarter than him. That is a very difficult situation to be in if you want to actually build economic resistance. Who do you like? I mean, to the poor man in this country, Mukesh Ambani has given them free data. I mean, he's anything but a class enemy for those guys. How the country is passing their time thanks to Mukesh Ambani today. No Mukesh Ambani, no free data, life changes. So who is your class enemy? How do you articulate who your class enemy is? These are, in a way, very philosophical questions also. Unless the opposition even starts engaging with these things, why blame poor Rahul Gandhi? Even the communist parties have stopped engaging with these questions. So I think, the real economic challenge is you have to call out this narrative of, India being in the great American dream kind of a phase right now. That's not happening. The world was very different. Capitalism was very different after the Second World War. There was no fiscal responsibility or budgetary management act. There was no talk about austerity. There were no populist governments. So we are in a very different time, but Modi's political genius, and you have to give it to Modi. And, why Rahul Gandhi can't do that, A, his articulation himself is very convoluted. B, the kind of political organization he has at his disposal, he doesn't even know which of them believes in what he's saying, which of them will go to the BJP, which of them are just there to sort of, protect their own personal fortunes. So politics in a country of 1.4 billion people is also about the kind of organization you have built and cultivated. Any political leader with, I would say, astuteness and smartness, the exodus which is happening from the Congress party would not be a bad thing. You could actually, it's a natural purge which is happening. If you have, the political sort of acumen, you can actually build a fighting organization on that. But then you have to intellectually engage with these questions rather than do monologues.
Okay, great. Let's have some questions from here, and then I'll ask some questions from the audience. Pranav, can you help us with the mics? Just pass some around. Yes, sir. Go ahead. You're getting a mic. So we'll take 3 questions from here and then 3 from audience.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Nipun Anand. I had one question with respect to the political opposition. So the vantage point is political opposition. When we see pre-2019 Lok Sabha elections, so BJP comes up with this PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, 6,000 rupees per annum to small and medium farmers. Congress comes up with this idea of sort of universal basic income of Nyaya, 72,000 rupees per annum. Now look at the difference. But the BJP sold it quite well and people bought it. Does it have to do with political credibility, the political language, the political grammar the political parties have to convince the people? Or is it something very, very organizational and fundamental which is wrong with the opposition? So one idea is selling, one is not, whether the difference is like huge, humongous. So what is the issue there? Why the economic grammar or the political articulation is not happening from the opposition? Thank you.
Namita, you can take one of these.
You have 2 here, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was really fascinating talk. Thank you, Rahul. And thanks to the speakers. I was looking at the RBI Consumer Confidence Survey, and for people who are earning less than rupees 5,000, about 60% believe that their life has worsened in the last 1 year. The numbers are slightly better for between 5,000 to 10,000, and so on it goes, to the point that for people earning above 1 lakh, it's about 25% who feel that their life has worsened. So exactly what you've been talking about, Harish. And I think that, you know, when we think back to Singur, for example, which was the last time that the government took such fierce action, I would say, against farmers, where actually they shot at farmer protesters. We are seeing rubber bullets this time, but it's a pretty severe onslaught onto the farmers, and that sort of changed the sort of politics in West Bengal completely, in a way that the CPM was completely decimated. So, I just wanted you to, what does that mean for, as you said, anger that you have been seeing? Now, of course, it could be a cynicism that, the opposition is not good. But for example, in the US context, we see that if voters are not motivated, they don't turn out to vote. So are you seeing some of that sort of translating into what the anger translating into not feeling great about the leadership and therefore not turning out to vote? And what does that mean for the conversations that we've been having about politics? How does that sort of factor in the Indian context, that sort of narrative? And Roshan, I think I think thank you. I think the way you presented the political genius, I think it lies not just in selling the dream, but also, as you said, the fire extinguisher. Every time there is a big issue, whether it's OROP in the past or it's, it just leads to this, them responding, or demonetization, making sure that people are able to access their cash in a better way and things like that. There is constantly those efforts that are going on. But I was wondering, like, I just feel like there is this tendency to heap everything onto the opposition, but I do feel that there is the narratives that are being created about the opposition non-stop by the media, which is completely controlled. The TV media is definitely controlled, and then even in the print media, there is so much pressure in terms of what is presented, what is not presented. That it's really very hard for the opposition to actually construct a narrative. And I do not think that this discussion can be devoid of that kind of authoritarianism. The fact that everybody, whether it is through corporate ownership or it's through the pressure from the government, the kind of narratives that are being created are very much controlled. So how much would you assign, the blame to that, as opposed to the opposition not having the ability to construct these narratives? Because at the end of the day, you have to present an idea and see how that response is received. But if that idea is completely distorted and fragmented in that sense, then how do you? And last question is just, I completely agree with you that the left sort of narrative, given how right the economic narrative has gone, is really important. And I was wondering if, Piketty's work, where he talks about how within Thomas Piketty, the French economist, like how he talks about, because it was interesting for me that the Goldman Sachs, as you said, report, it is really talking about 4% of Indians who are going to really profit with the capital flows that are going to come in. At the same time, the people at the bottom, they are believing that their conditions are going to worsen. So what we are really seeing is that the flow of global capital is resulting in the creation of policies. Now, whether you see that in terms of the land acquisition laws, the forest laws, the dilution of environment protection laws, it is the flow of capital from outside that is determining these policies. When you're talking about real estate sector, so, I head the land rights initiative at CPR. And when you talk about the real estate sector, when you were saying that who is buying these houses, I just wanted to give you an example, because a family member just went through the allotment of real estate at DLF. Most of the houses are already sold to NRIs. And therefore, when you say there's such a scarcity of housing, it's interesting because there's a scarcity of housing for Indians. So, and it creates this perception that all the Indians have a lot of money, whereas actually all the houses have been already bought up by NRIs. So we are having a situation where we just have, and these NRIs are not living there. So that's creating an artificial scarcity, and it's driving up property prices to such a high level. And the impression is created that Indians have the money to buy it. They probably do, some of them do. But the impression that they do is greater than this thing. And finally, 1977, yeah.
Pass it on to others. Na? Like, you shouldn't be just asking all the questions. Baki log aaye. Hanji, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Akshay. I will ask you. Sure. Yes, I'll keep it short. First question is a bit tangential because it's not pertaining to politics economy, but if they also be talking about the different factors that influence voting patterns and elections.
Okay, hi. Since we have been talking about the different factors that influence voting patterns and elections, the judgment came today, right, on electoral bonds. I can't help but ask you a question regarding this. To what extent this judgment, which has declared the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional, would really make a dent to BJP's stronghold? My second question is, okay, I forgot the second question. I'll come back to that later. But yes.
But they have to also.
Sure.
So, Harish, you want to start? Do any questions that you like? And
I think the question which you said, there's a difference between promising me the money but showing the money. In 2019, when farmers went to vote, they saw that money had actually come in. And the same thing happened in Madhya Pradesh this time. Okay, I think 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, everybody had said that BJP is losing in Madhya Pradesh. And there was huge anti-incumbency. But then you had this Mukhyamantri Kisan Yojana, in which he transferred 12,000 rupees, 6,000 under PM Kisan, and Madhya Pradesh's own another 6,000. And plus you had the Ladli Behna, this thing. And plus farmers got just 1 month before, they got a lot of money under even the PM Fasal Bima Yojana, So you got, I don't know, maybe an average voter got about, say, 5,000, 6,000 rupees, 1 month ahead of election. So show me the money, it is there. The other one, 72,000 is a whatever. It's a dream, and you come out with that in last 2 months. Where here's someone who actually has money. So I think it's just the efficiency, the machine, how it is able to react so fast. Is the thing. Yeah.
Roshan, you want to respond?
I'll respond very quickly. About your question. See, winning elections, is actually like making a biryani. You need rice, you need chicken, you need onions, you need garlic, you need spices. Something like a nyaya is basically the saffron on the biryani. The BJP didn't win 2019 elections just because of PM Kisan. It had a whole lot of other things going for it. Where the Congress has the required wherewithal, it actually does well. In Chhattisgarh, it promised a paddy bonus and it actually defeated a 3-time BJP government. So the Congress's problem is not that, like the fiscal math doesn't work out. Its problem is it doesn't have other things going for it. So that's one. Now, electoral bonds just do the math. The BJP has had, I think, around 5,000 crore rupees from electoral bonds. Look at how much money the BJP has earned. It's that simple. So I don't think it's going to be hit hugely as far as the pure income thing is concerned. About media and opposition, like I have a basic conflict of interest because my bread and butter comes from media. There are problems with the media. I would say print is still better than TV, which has become completely obnoxious. I would just like to say 2 things. Given the state of media ownership in this country, there's very little reason to assume that they have any interest in going against the status quo. And when I say status quo, I don't mean the BJP. Things are very good for rich people in this country right now. Media owners are very rich people in this country. The second is, having said this, you show me an instance where, there has been popular mobilization and the media has ignored it. And I will accept your criticism completely. And they might want to spin it, but they have to cover it, whether it is Shaheen Bagh or farmers' protest or whatever it is. If there is a popular protest, the media has to cover it. The day the opposition starts getting political traction, it will be, if there's one thing which the history of media in this country tells us, it pivots. The moment the politics pivot, the media will also pivot. Now, to expect the media to lead the charge as far as pivoting politics is concerned, I think is a little unreal. This is what it is. I know, as far as the other thing is concerned, rich people are driving the economy, so this is it. Like you said, if NRIs are buying flats, whoever is buying flats, somebody is selling them and making a lot of money. And this is not just about flats. Even if you look at cars, the Altos of the world are not getting sold anymore. The Cretas of the world are getting sold.
Yes.
So
Luxury cars.
there's clearly a move, from the non-premium to the premium segment of even the middle class. That was the point I was trying to make.
But that's probably 10%. I think if it is 40%, I think
the operating part is, the total turnover of that economy is probably bigger than, say, a typical European country. That is what is attracting capital. The capital is not coming here to change the fortunes of the Indian economy. They see it as a pie which is bigger than anything which is available to them in the rest of the world. That is the factor which is driving capital or confidence in this country.
No, I think so what would be the segment which is seeing some kind of improvement? Is it just 10%, 20%? Of course, for 10%, the growth might be very, very high.
See, it can
So
be
where is the?
it can be 10% of the economy, but within that 10% is massive growth. So
Okay.
if I was driving, say, a Swift Desire, tomorrow I expect to be driving a Creta. Day after that, I expect to be driving a BMW. So that is the growth process. It is the rich becoming richer, which is driving the growth process. And as far as if I'm a businessman, I only have to sell. I don't mind who I sell to.
Okay, some questions from the Zoom. Many of these have already been answered. How should opposition tackle economic problems? One sort of question on politics, which is with economic distress, how strong feelings of Modi has enhanced India's image is going to be hurt, or will it still remain there? And then the reading on taxation needs a second glance. Tax rates on individuals are one of the highest, coupled with indirect taxes. The reading to me is more so it's a large sort of information rather than a question. So just on the economic distress is going to also puncture the narrative on increasing India's image in the world.
Maybe not in this election.
Okay.
But definitely, I think in the future, I think Roshan said it in the beginning itself. You can't see an economy cannot sustain just on consumption beyond a point. At some point, the consumer is a producer. If the money stops coming in, I think that is going to be the real challenge. In Modi 3,
Okay.
if at all that happens. But right now, I think things are
So
all
in
still
the
going on.
short run, you don't think
Maybe
anything
not.
changing
But yes, definitely in Modi 3,
Yeah,
because
Roshan said in the
given
beginning.
the jobs, I think unemployment is going to be the main issue in the. I think generating jobs is going to be a real challenge. Because. Especially with all the AI and all these coming, and we know that the sectors which did well, and they are the ones which are going to be affected the
So
most.
just to end this conversation, which is where I feel perhaps our politicians will have to start talking left, right, center. Creating jobs is going to be difficult for everyone, right? While politicians still continue to campaign that we are going to create jobs. Do voters actually believe that these politicians will be able to create jobs, or they think, okay, they are just saying things, so let's hear them? Or should politicians now start saying, especially after this election, that job creation is going to be difficult? What we can best do is give you some skill sets, and you will have to create employment for yourself.
Well,
this
to answer
thing-
this question in a slightly tangential
Yes.
manner,
Because no one is going to be
if
able
I
to
may,
create
on a
jobs.
slightly philosophical note also.
Huh.
You see, politics, what drives politics can take very different forms. Like a lot of people who are otherwise, very critical of the BJP are actually, have suddenly started talking about Imran Khan. That, you need actually somebody like an Imran Khan in our country, he's mobilized the people and all that. So Imran Khan might have a lot of popular support.
Yeah.
But what is driving that popular support is actually coming from the absolute destruction of, the state and economy that Pakistan is. Even in a country like India, we are a country, which suffered a partition on religious lines. Muslim, had huge political mobilization behind it of Muslims. And that is how it was able to carve out a nation. So there's no guarantee that politics will only work on economic issues. And I think, because we are discussing the economy today, we have actually ignored a very large part of what drives our day-to-day politics in this country. It has become absolutely toxic, bordering on insane, I would say. And there's absolutely no doubt as to who is fueling that turn in our politics. I mean, this is not to say that everybody else was an honest politician or politics was absolutely violence free and all that. This kind of a centralized effort behind making politics very shrill and divisive, and you can choose whatever you call it. I think one also has to talk about that. So the opposition's challenge, as long as those issues dominate your day-to-day political conversations, bringing the economy that to a very nuanced economic argument, as to what exactly has to be done. There are no silver bullets around, nothing can be done which will like sort of improve things tomorrow. It's going to be a very difficult task. So I don't envy the opposition's challenge. But then you don't get to claim that you're leading a country of 1.4 billion people.
Yes.
India is a very diverse, very difficult politics. So if you want to, even claim that you're actually leading these people, then I mean, sky is the limit for working more and sort of both physically and intellectually is my point. I mean, I don't claim to be the leader of 1.4 billion Indians. I draw my salary and I go home. But that is not the bar I'll set for a leader who claims to do so.
You want to add something to?
Not really, but I think I believe that even toxicity has run its course. Okay, if they think that you can sustain on this, it's not going to work. Okay, so in the short run, yes, everything is okay, but I think the real elephant in the room is going to be, youth unemployment. Let me tell you about myself. Okay, I am just a raw graduate. Okay, I just passed out with with hardly anything. I didn't study, but I prospered during the 90s and 2000s, throughout, So that kind of a rising tide which lifts all boats. We are not seeing that kind of a thing here. And if people from IITs and IIMs are not getting placements, it's a very serious crisis, and this is happening precisely at a time when our demographics are supposed to be very favorable, So I think the single thing is going to be this thing, and I'm 100% sure that this toxicity will run out of it. It is not possible to sustain, and that is where I think even this whole thing about whatever Rahul Gandhi talking about, that I think it is going to definitely it is going to have some traction, more than whatever reservations and all these things. I think Bharat Jodo, whatever Nafrat ki Bazaar mein, I think that is going to have something traction in the long run, especially among the youth.
Yeah, and as Roshan was pointing out, perhaps in next 5 years, some of the political economic contradictions would also become so large for BJP to manage.
No,
So,
just one thing, Rahul,
yeah.
because we're talking this. See, it is one thing to talk about esoteric harmony. Look at the tangible issues. As far as the social fabric of this country is concerned, between 1989 and now, the BJP has been able to move the needle so rightward.
Yes.
What was the opposition's reactions on the Pran Pratishtha day? Forget what my position is. What was the political opposition's position on that day? You've had actually a state, BJP ruled state, which has brought a UCC code. What has the opposition said about it? So this, harmony talk can't be esoteric talk. You actually have to risk your whatever little political capital which exists today and actually take the BJP head on. The BJP's confidence comes from the fact that it knows that, even if Rahul Gandhi wants, 90% of the Congress organization will never take it head on. That probably, I'm more sympathetic to Rahul Gandhi's position, but boss, it's his party at the end of the day.
Thank you, Roshan and Harish, for coming to CPR today, and everyone who joined us. We'll meet in 7-8 days with a new topic and a new conversation. So thank you, everyone on Zoom.
Thanks.
And those who came here at CPR. We'll see you.
Thanks.